Thanks for joining the sBetter podcast, a podcast dedicated to this reality that life is so much better with God, community, and purpose. My name is Jonathan Gleason. As always, Josh is hanging out with us. And today I want to introduce the topic actually by telling a little story. This is something that happened to my wife about a week and a half ago. Okay. Josh, you know, Dana works for a nonprofit called America Kids Belong. Yeah. And their whole focus is to work with government as well as faith-based organizations, creatives, as well as local businesses to help kids in the foster care system find homes, be adopted. And so about a week and a half ago, she posted a picture to a couple social media sites, and the picture was of this girl who's looking for a home, and she's been in the foster care system for many, many years, and a quote came with it. This was a quote from the girl herself, talking about how she wants to be a part of a loving family, a family that would actually bring her to church. Now, seems innocent enough, but Dana received no fewer than like 5 responses, all very angry and anti-church and Christianity, and of course, my wife wasn't expecting that, and maybe she should. We know that, you know, issues of faith and Christianity, a lot of people feel strongly on either end, but a little disappointing, to say the least. And so the question that we're going to be trying to tackle today is, how do we respond? How do we respond when our thoughts, our beliefs are either attacked or Christianity is marginalized in some way? What is a good, healthy response for us to have? Now, before we get into answering that question, we're going to do our little game. This one's a little different. Maybe not as fun as some of the ones we've done in the past. But the story that I shared with my wife, that's not an altogether uncommon thing. And so I asked you to come up with some stories that you've either read or heard about where these things have happened to other Christians in the United States over the years. And we're going to go head to head who found the better stories, okay? Now, we're going to do 3 different categories. Funny story, interesting story, you know, kind of like and then maybe downright disturbing, okay? So you've got your funny, interesting, and disturbing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I do wanted to say, like, we've specifically stuck with the United States. Yeah. If you're a person who isn't in the United States, if you're in a country, like, there's wildly different responses to how this happens in every single country. So if you're not from here, we're sticking with our country specifically. Yeah. We have very unique experience, I think, with how religious freedom interacts with also our freedom to say whatever we want. Yeah. So like those two can kind of create and cultivate these types of issues.
And we are growing our international podcast community.
Yeah.
So the 162 countries that are represented right now, we're talking to you guys.
Yeah. I to cover our bases, just in case you're listening, you're like, I don't understand this at all. Yeah.
You want me to share first?
Sure, yeah, you can go ahead. Which one is this?
This was a silly one.
Okay.
This is one that gave me a bit of a chuckle. So a couple years ago, a school district decided that they needed to remove all religious references to the song Silent Night for Christmas. So just imagine kids getting up on stage. Yeah. Silent Night. Beep. Wait, we can't say that one. Really quiet night. I mean,
yeah.
Like, it's going to be hard to sing that song without the religious, undertones. So I couldn't help but laugh when I heard that one.
That's funny. I don't know. I'd love to hear their rendition.
I looked for it. I could not find it.
Mine is it's something that I heard and that I did a little more research on, because the first time I heard it, I was like, really? Like, that just sounds ridiculous. But our church has been involved with a group called Kids Beach Club for a while, and this is just an after-school program. We don't go during the day because that actually isn't allowed. But we show up at the school as soon as school ends, and we give the kids an opportunity to come and hear a Bible story, get a little bit of small group time, get a snack, be loved on by adults and stuff who love Jesus. And it's a really great program. But in response to not only Kids Beach Club, but a couple of other after-school programs, there are a couple of states who there's been individuals in either atheist groups or specifically satanic groups that have called their after-school program, in response to ours, After School Satan Club. And this is all really satirical. I don't know if they're actually doing much, but they're doing so with the purpose of bringing an end to religious after-school programs.
So if the administration said no to after-school Satan program,
yes.
they would have to say no to after-school Christian club.
And so that's my silly one I brought, because it does sound silly. It is a little scary to think about kids dancing around and but I don't know if that's actually happening. It's all kind of political in nature.
Okay, so who has the funnier one?
I think yours is funnier. Just the idea of kids trying to sing Silent Night without or I'm just imagining this really upset music teacher who's getting brought that idea okay, so we want to sing Silent Night, but we want you to come up with a rendition that doesn't talk about God at all.
New lyrics, yeah. Okay, I agree. I think that one's funnier. And I think it's only funnier because after school Satan's program just sounds really dark.
Yeah.
And it just...
Maybe I should have put that in disturbing, but I don't know.
No, I like it. I'm going to go ahead and take the point on that one, though.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the interesting category. In Kansas, there was a story in which a middle school student was trying to promote a prayer event at her school. She was not allowed to put up the flyers because it had a Bible verse talking about God loving the world. You might know what that Bible verse is. And so she was turned down, at least when it came to the flyer. What makes this story interesting, though, is that there were other flyers that were approved. One of the flyers that was approved was for another event. Lil Wayne was quoted talking about good weed and alcohol. So, Lil Wayne, okay, Jesus, not so much. Kind of interesting, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's the story. What's your interest?
Okay. Mine I found interesting because it's just an idea of this is something that's been around for a really long time, even since the inception of our country. But in 1777, which, if you know your history, when did the United States become
76.
Yes. So 1 year afterward. Now, granted, we had a lot of issues that we've worked through beyond just this, but there was a law that actually kept Catholics from holding public office in the state of New York. They were not allowed to, and I did a little more reading on this. It had more to do with there was just an influx of Spanish and French Catholics that had come over, and they wanted to hold there was probably some back then you had even bosses of your specific race that can come over trying to be lobbyists to and keep people out of office. But in general, if you were a Catholic, you believed in the Catholic faith, you were not allowed to hold public office in the United States in 1777, or in New York specifically.
Yeah.
Which is interesting to me.
That is very interesting.
I'd never heard that or read that before, but
you may already know this, but JFK was the first Catholic president actually in the United States. So you think of all the presidents that came before him, that was a long list of presidents. He's the first Catholic, and at this point, I think might be the only Catholic president we've ever had. There might be another one.
I mean, say what you want, but Biden has claimed that he's a Catholic.
Has he?
He
was
raised Catholic.
I have not heard that.
Yeah,
okay.
And so he said that he's the second one.
Is that right? He said that? Man, I gotta stay a little more savvy. Okay.
Yeah.
Who gets the point on this one?
What was yours again?
Lil Wayne?
It's Lil Wayne, by the way. Just so you know.
Maybe we can edit that out. It's probably too late. I've always said that. Okay. Maybe. Who's gonna get the vote?
I don't care. You can have it if you want to. Mine's more historical.
Okay.
Yours is more I don't know. You have the cultural reference.
That's true, even though I mispronounced his name. Okay, I got 2 points. We only have 3 categories here,
so you won.
I think I probably
won. Are you going
to
sweep me? Is the question.
Well, probably not. Okay, this is the disturbing category. There was a case filed against Augustus University of Georgia. This was filed by Jennifer Keaton, and she was filing this because she was told that she would not be allowed to graduate unless she stopped sharing her Christian beliefs with other students. It's wow, that's kind of disturbing that you would not be able to graduate just because you're sharing your thoughts and ideas. I think that breaks some, key amendment rights. But
yeah, I'd love to know what led to that. What was she doing that brought so much, there's no way that she was the only person on campus that was doing any type of campus ministry.
I know.
Why her specifically? That's interesting.
I tried to look a little deeper into it because that was my first thought too. Was she just so inflammatory that I couldn't find it.
Yeah. All right, and then mine touches on some pretty dark stuff. But in 2015, this was just the one that like came to my mind immediately, and I looked it up, and on top of that, just found way too much like information on this, and it just disturbed me to no end. But if you've been keeping up with attacks on even just churches in general, you'll know that a lot of churches that get attacked are unfortunately black churches too.
Yeah.
And in 2015, Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, long name, in Charleston, South Carolina, was attacked. 9 individuals were murdered by a neo-Nazi guy who came in there and just had a problem with not only them, but also them serving who he claimed to also serve, which bothers me to no end because,
Absolutely.
That's not only Christians being put to death because they are the color of their skin and they believe in God, but also this guy is doing it because he thinks he's doing it for God, which is just another big issue. So
very disturbing. You get the point on that one for sure.
That's not a point I want to win.
No, it's true. Well, I still won the game. Definitely a little different game than normal.
Congratulations, Jonathan, on winning the marginalized Christianity game.
Good for me. So one of the things that oftentimes gets brought up, or at least a phrase, a word that gets brought up when you have these types of conversation, is the word persecution. The word persecution. And so I thought before we really start answering that question, hey, what should our response be? I think it's probably a good idea to understand, okay, what are these levels of persecution? Because like you had mentioned at the beginning, what someone is experiencing in another country may be far different than what we're experiencing, and response needs to be varied. And so let's first kind of just talk about persecution. There's an individual by the name, actually a researcher by the name of Charles Popp, who did extensive research dating all the way back from the first century to the present, and just charted really 5 stages of persecution. And so we're just going to share these really quickly. The first stage is stereotyping. This is the idea that the description of a few, or the actions of a few, kind of get lumped in with the majority. So for example, someone might start saying, well, all Christians are hypocrites. Certainly there are Christians who are hypocrites. Does that mean all Christians are hypocrites? Probably not. Well, all Christians are angry. All Christians are really boring people. Again, that's just stereotyping. There are certainly boring Christians. There are certainly angry Christians. But, if you say it enough and you say it repeatedly, all of a sudden that becomes the new identity of that group of people. So stage 1, stereotyping.
Number 2 is vilifying, which is just a level up of the stereotyping. Stereotyping is typically, I don't want to say it's unhurtful. It's absolutely hurtful, but these are things where you're making them out to be almost unhuman. So use of abusive or slanderous words to describe a person, or the specifically group. If we're talking about Christians, it's things like all Christians are bigoted, or all Christians are hateful, and they despise you. And that's the type of unfortunately, both what we were just talking about with my last one, there are people who kind of bring that to us, and that idea of all Christians are hateful because they are claiming to serve God, and that one person will see that person doing that and be like, see, look at this, all Christians are this way. And then you have, specifically in youth cultures, we know this, if our students are hearing that, that's something that we have to combat, that's something that we have to actively try to break that mindset on, because if they're hearing that from people, then it's our job to break that. And not to say that adults can't be easily swayed, but I feel like students are more so.
For sure.
But
Number 3 is marginalizing. So once you've vilified, once you've gotten those stereotypes, that's when now people start pushing Christians to the margins of society. You might even hear phrases like, hey, that's okay for you to practice in your church, at your home, but do not bring that into the public arena. In fact, you might even see Christians not receiving positions of power, influence, media spots, or even professors in universities being denied tenure because of their Christian beliefs. And so again, that's that marginalizing, pushing people to the edges.
And then number 4 is criminalizing. This is, I think, especially true of other churches and around the world that we hear about, but like this is starting to get to the level that we see less of in America, at least I believe so. But this is when lawsuits and legislation is specifically directed at the church or individuals who are practicing the faith, and so eventually following Jesus is equated with law breaking. Doing something that is known as Christian is also considered to be worthy of fines or jail time.
Yeah, and once you get to that level, that criminalizing level, that is just setting the stage for full-blown persecution, which is stage 5, where you've got people being arrested, you have property being seized, you've got beatings, and in some cases, you even have people being put to death. So these are the 5 stages, and I would say probably in the United States, we've certainly seen 1, 2, and 3 played out. There's definitely instances, you even brought up one, where there's maybe 4 and 5. But for the most part, those are things that are probably happening more widespread in other parts of the world. And so a lot of what we're going to be sharing has to do with that level 1, 2, and 3 response. And so know that every situation is nuanced. The list that we have of how are we going to respond to persecution, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some ideas, particularly for those who might find yourself in 1, 2, and 3. So the question, how should we respond? So I think the first response is to see, the opportunities behind problems. So instead of just focusing on the problem, really evaluate and say, hey, are there actually opportunities to advance the gospel?
Yeah.
And this is not just, honestly, this is not just a good life choice when it comes to Christian persecution. I think this is just good life skill in general. So for example, there are lots of problems in our world, but people are making some serious money from solving these problems. Let's go back to last year, COVID hits, and no one can meet in their offices. And so Zoom comes in and says,
gosh.
Here's an opportunity for us to make a lot of money and an opportunity for you guys to meet. Right now, lumber is like sky high, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you know there are companies who are saying, hey, we've got this composite material. You can build your house with this instead. And it's like an opportunity. So the question for us as followers of Christ is, okay, what kind of opportunity might persecution actually bring us? And historically, Josh, what typically happens historically when the church is persecuted?
When they're pushed, the gospel just gets furthered. Yeah. But one of the examples that I was thinking of when I was trying to come up with stuff for this is, what caused the church to explode in the first place was, what is his name? Wow, how did I forget this? The very first martyr. Stephen. I kept saying Simon in my head. Stephen. Right after that, all of them left because there was probably some fear there, but literally every Christian gets pushed out. The disciples split. All of the people that they had been making a church there, like in Acts 2, where it said they multiplied it daily, all went out, and then the church exploded even more. And it's interesting how and I wonder if Satan sees that and he's like, how do I change my tactics? Because
darn, that didn't work. Yeah, absolutely. So whether it's the first century and the exponential growth that the church experienced under persecution, or even modern day examples, we've got communist Russia, communist China. They're cracking down, making laws that restrict Christianity, and then it booms, and people's interest is increased. So we see that throughout history. And on the flip side of that, when Christianity has actually held the mantle of power, it usually is not so good for the church. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the reasons I think is because it's really hard for us to demonstrate some of the key characteristics of Jesus when we are holding the mantle of power. What does forgiveness look like when you're the one in power? What does generosity and mercy and grace look like? It's harder for that to actually shine. It kind of goes back to that whole idea that Christ's light shines the brightest when it is the darkest.
Yeah. I was even thinking, I've heard specifically Platt say this recently. I've been reading one of his books, but he talked about how that just goes back to the fact that when we have that, we need to be giving it up. Like that's why he told the rich young ruler, give everything you have, because we're not meant to have all of everything. We're actually meant to be less than,
So use that position of power to actually elevate others.
Exactly.
Rather than just to hold on, these are my rights, this is what God has given me, so I'm going to enjoy it.
If we lose this, then Christianity's done. It's like, no, probably quite the opposite, actually.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great perspective to have. And so our first encouragement would be, hey, when you find yourself maybe getting a little anxious or frustrated, maybe you've experienced some persecution, maybe you've just read something on Facebook, and you're wanting to send out some sort of response. Take a step back and say, okay, is this actually an opportunity? Can I actually advance the kingdom in a unique way because of this?
I think somebody who already has lived this out and has talked about it here on the podcast before was actually Bug Brown. If you listened to that one, if you haven't, she's an FCA coordinator and everything. But even with like things where it's not necessarily somebody against Christianity in particular, but if you're feeling like you're being attacked, it is a great opportunity to show the love of God to people. Like she is an African American individual, and the moment that everything started to escalate last year, she immediately thought, how can I show love to people who might not love me? And so she started the Unity in the Community events. She invited like a bunch of police officers to come be prayed over by her. She showed her community that she invited tons and tons of different students of all different races to share, and just to be like, hey, this is what the community of God looks like. And I just know that there had to have been some people who came a little cautiously, having negative thoughts about everything that's gone on, and maybe even her race, and thought, no, she clearly has God inside of her. Like, there's no way for me to even make that argument anymore. Like, I hope that that's the case anyway. Like, she saw that as an opportunity to show people God's love, and I just love that.
That's a great example. All right, so look for opportunities even in the midst of problems. And then the second choice that we would encourage you to make when you find yourself under persecution would be continue to live out joy and hope. That's something that every follower of Christ has, and it's something that we need to demonstrate even when we're feeling frustrated, even when we feel attacked. Josh, before you give this Bible verse for us, when you hear the term fight or flight, like what comes to your mind?
It's whenever you get attacked by something or something goes wrong, what is your response? Is it to put up the fist and defend yourself, or is it to get as far away from that situation as possible?
And I think we see this played out with Christians when it comes to persecution too. The fight instinct is, no, I want to demand what I think is just and right, and I'm going to dig my heels into the ground, and I'm going to, have a slugfest if it is required of me. Or we like to run, and different than your example of the Acts 2 church, oftentimes we run to the safety of our Christian bubbles, and we distance ourselves from anyone who would think differently than us, anyone who would not affirm us, and so we're not letting the light of Christ shine very bright when we're cloistered away in our safe little communities. And so I don't think either response is very good. And in fact, throughout Scripture, we get this impression, we get this idea that this planet, this earth, is actually not our home. And when we understand that, well, then we can respond a little differently. Go ahead and read Hebrews.
Hebrews 13:14 says, "For here we do not have an enduring city, but we are looking for the city that is to come."
In your own words, what is the writer of Hebrews saying here?
He's saying that if you're trying to establish something here, like a Christian nation or city or whatever it is, it's not going to endure. Like there's something actively going against us there. Our home that we are supposed to look onto is not on this world. Just like you said, it's of God. He's already created it, and it's going to be there for us.
Yeah, and when we understand that, I mean, if this wasn't true, like if Scripture said, hey, this is the only place that you have then it would make sense that we should stand and fight for every scrap of soil that we have. But since we know, hey, this isn't actually our eternal home, how should we respond then? Well, I think we should consistently respond in the joy that we have in Christ. And where's that joy coming from? Well, it's coming in that hope that, hey, we know that we're going to be with our Heavenly Father in heaven. That's our eternal home. And that's where the joy comes from. You've got an example, even just in Scripture, how the apostles lived this out really well.
Yeah, so one of my favorites, my favorite book of the Bible is Acts now. I just love the stories that come out of it and the example that a lot of them lead. But this was right before Stephen was actually killed, so none of them had been murdered yet. Only Jesus, really. Jesus had died, he came back, and there's no reason for them to believe just yet that all of that's going to happen to them. Obviously, Jesus said, "You're all going to suffer for my name," and but so many times they hear stuff like that and they forget it. So, but they start to experience that suffering. It says that they were all put before the Sanhedrin. This is after the explosion of the Acts 2 church, and it reads like this. It says the apostles left the Sanhedrin, and obviously, what you need to know there is that they were beaten, they were abused verbally, they were persecuted hardcore. None of them were killed yet, but it says that they left the Sanhedrin rejoicing because they had been counted worthy of suffering disgrace for the name. Day after day in the temple courts and from house to house, they never stopped teaching and proclaiming the good news that Jesus is the Christ. And it was just this catalyst for them that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing. Right. Because Jesus said we were going to have this happen. It's happening. And that means that we're doing what we need to be doing. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Their purpose was actually being fulfilled. And when you find, that your purpose is being fulfilled, that actually brings great joy in your life. We talk about that here. Life is better with God, community, and purpose. I think my wife is a really good example to me of someone who just consistently brings joy in the midst of difficult situations. Over the years, she's had a great opportunity to connect with people who are not just, not Christians, but even hostile towards Christianity, even within her extended family. And she just makes the choice every single time, no matter what's said, no matter how, they view her or her faith, to continue just to love and bring joy into their life. And so many of those people who were kind of hesitant to even become her friends, years down the road, consider her one of their best friends and go to her for counsel and have even asked for prayer, even though, they're not really interested in God, don't even know if he exists, but hey, they see Christ at work in her life and they say, well, maybe there's something to this. Can you be praying for me? And then she consistently points back to the reason I'm like this is because of what Jesus has done in my life. And it's just a really beautiful testimony. And so I think even for us, none of us want to see our freedoms taken away. None of us want to see any sort of persecution, whether it's just stereotypes or it's, imprisonment. But in the midst of that broader perspective that our home is not here, all those things actually can become quite trivial in light of our future hope. And I think we need to respond in that way. It makes me think of being a missionary actually in Africa. We would have the opportunity, the privilege to host certain short-term mission trips. And so these people from the United States, they come and we put together little serving projects for them. And it's funny, you've been on several mission trips, so I think you can probably relate to this.
Okay.
With any group that came, you could almost split the group into two. There would be what I would refer to as the whiners and the complainers. And that was maybe 1/4 of the group. The majority of the group, they were not this way. But there were the people that came and they had a very clear agenda that this was going to happen, this wasn't going to happen, this was going to be the impact that they made, this is how they were going to make the impact. And then when those things didn't happen exactly the way they wanted and anticipated them happening, well, they were just going to whine, fuss, cry, and complain. Really exhausting, really hard to be around those folks. But then the rest of the group, there were the ones that said, hey, you know what? No matter what comes our way, we're going to take every advantage of what God has prepared for us. I think of one group that they had a series of just really difficult things that happened. It first started with this car. It was a rental car. It had a fender bender, and they were in the middle of trying to get to a certain location at a certain time. And there's this big gash now in their rental car, so hundreds of dollars in damage. They're late for this event. No kidding, the very next day, they're driving. They hit this pothole, blown tire. The alloy rim was cracked. Again, hundreds of dollars in damage. Late for their next event, and it was just like every day there was something else. And again, the vast majority of the group, they laughed about these things. They joked about it, and they continued just to show each other love and those around them, including me, joy, which brought up my spirits. And then what I kept hearing over and over again was, hey, Jonathan, it's no big deal. It's not a problem at all. You know what we're going to do? We're just going to take every opportunity. We realize, Jonathan, that we only have a short amount of time here. And so we're going to seize every opportunity that we have to point to Christ. And I want to just say that again. I want you to just think about your own life. We only have a short amount of time. So how can we use every opportunity for the advancement of the gospel? And I think this is where we should be when it comes to responding to any sort of persecution that comes our way. Any final thoughts?
No, there's just a lot of stuff you can point to always be angry about anything. And this goes for every single person. And it's not just Christians. We have an active enemy who will absolutely try to get you to hear negative comments about you or your faith or anything like that. And it's going to try to get you to do those 5 things to every other person, to vilify non-Christians and anything like that. But when you seize that as an opportunity to not only be joyful because God has promised those who suffer for his name so much goodness, but also see that as an opportunity to love on that person despite what they put you through, that person's going to see that and want that.
Yeah.
Because their whole life, they've responded the exact same way the world has, especially in America, which is when you get vilified, you vilify. And when you don't respond that way, that's something that stands out and is unique. And I can't, if there's a way to be a missionary in America, it's just simply living that out. But yeah.
If problems come, look for those opportunities. When you find yourself maybe lacking some joy and expressing that joy, remember your future hope and live that joy out.
Yeah.
Until next time, God bless.